already tight around her neck. Marlo Thorne, just 23 years old, stood trembling on the wooden platform in Bitter Creek's town square. Her wrists were bound, her dress torn, her cheeks streaked with dirt and tears. In less than 10 minutes, she would be dead for a crime she did not commit. A hush fell over the crowd. About 40 souls gathered to watch the first public hanging in 3 years. Children pressed their faces to the windows. Shopkeepers leaned in their doorways. Some stared with cold curiosity. Others turned away, ashamed but too afraid to speak up. At the front stood Judge Harrison Blackwood, tall, broad, silver hair gleaming in the afternoon light. His voice carried across the square like thunder. "Marlo Thorne, seamstress, orphan, convicted thief. Today you will pay for your crime." His gray eyes locked with hers, and in that moment she saw something that made her blood run cold. Not justice, not duty, but satisfaction. He wanted this. Garrett Walsh tugged on the rope, testing the trap door beneath her feet. The creak of the wood echoed louder than the whispers of the crowd. Marlo's knees buckled. She tried to pray, but no words came. How could God allow this? She had worked hard since she was 14, sewing for families, mending clothes until her fingers bled, surviving on scraps in a rented room above the general store. She had never stolen a single thing in her life. But Judge Blackwood's wife, Elizabeth, had accused her of taking the emerald necklace, a piece worth more than Marlo would earn in a lifetime. The truth burned in Marlo's chest. She had seen Elizabeth burying it with her own eyes, hiding it in the garden behind their house. But no one would believe a poor orphan girl over the wife of a powerful judge. Now here she stood, the rope scratching her neck, her life about to end because of someone else's lies. Judge Blackwood snapped his pocket watch shut and nodded at the executioner. Garrett's hand gripped the lever. The square grew silent. And then, the sound of spurs. Sharp metallic clinks against wooden steps, slow and deliberate. The crowd turned their heads. Someone was climbing the gallows. At first glance, he looked like nothing more than a worthless drifter. Boots coated in dust, hat crooked on his head, coat stained from the trail. His walk was uneven, his shoulders swaying. The sour stench of whiskey followed him like a cloud. It was impossible to ignore. Marlo's breath caught. Judge Blackwood scowled. The crowd murmured, confused. Who was this man stumbling up the steps as if he had every right to interrupt an execution? The executioner hesitated, his hand still on the lever. Judge Blackwood barked, "This is a legal proceeding. Move along, cowboy, before you join her on that platform." The stranger stopped halfway up the stairs, swayed a little, then looked straight at the judge. His voice slurred but carried across the square. "Legal? You call this legal? You're about to hang a girl who looks like she couldn't hurt a fly. What exactly did this little thing do? Murder the whole town?" The crowd stirred. Nervous glances, whispers. Even those who had been silent felt the weight of his words. For the first time, someone was questioning the judge. His face flushed red with irritation. "I'll not have some drunk disrupt the law in my town. Sheriff, remove him!" But the sheriff, Wade Morrison, didn't move. His eyes narrowed at the cowboy, studying him. Something about the man's presence held him back. The stranger staggered up another step, one hand gripping the rail for balance. His boots hit the wood in a clumsy rhythm. Clink, thud, clink. The square had gone eerily quiet, all eyes fixed on this uninvited guest. He pointed lazily toward Marlo, nearly losing his balance. "You're about to kill a girl in front of half the town, and you call that justice?" A ripple of unease spread through the crowd. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Shopkeepers leaned forward, suddenly interested. A few men whispered, nodding at the cowboy's words. Judge Blackwood's jaw tightened. "This girl is a thief. She stole from my wife. The evidence is clear. The trial was held. The verdict passed. You will leave this platform immediately, or join her." The stranger laughed, bitter and sharp, though his body still swayed like a drunk. "Trial? Don't make me laugh. How long did it last, Judge? 10 minutes? Did you even bother with evidence? Or was her only crime being poor enough to accuse?" Gasps whispered through the crowd. Someone muttered, "He's right." Another added, "Never did seem fair, that trial." Judge Blackwood's authority trembled. His eyes darted toward the crowd, then back to the cowboy. His hand brushed the butt of his revolver. "I said leave. This is your final warning." The cowboy stepped onto the platform, swaying slightly. But his eyes were sharp, piercing. He looked at Marlo, at the rope around her neck, then back at the judge. His voice lowered, steady now, but still loud enough for everyone to hear. "Funny thing about the law, Judge. It don't take kindly to corruption." Then, in one smooth motion, he pulled something from inside his coat. The crowd gasped. Guns shifted in their holsters. But it wasn't a weapon he held. It was a badge. A dented, tarnished star that still glimmered in the sunlight. The letters etched into the metal were faint but clear enough. Deputy U.S. Marshal. The square froze. Children fell silent in the windows. The sheriff straightened, recognition flashing in his eyes. Even the executioner's hand dropped away from the lever. Marlo's heart pounded. She had never seen this man before, never heard his name, but for the first time, hope flickered in her chest. The cowboy tucked the badge back into his coat, his smile grim. His voice carried with sudden authority. "Name's Caleb Mackenzie, and before you hang this girl, Judge, maybe you'd like to explain to a federal marshal exactly how this trial was conducted." He turned pale. His grip on his revolver faltered. Years of untouchable power, of unchecked authority, now threatened by a single man who didn't seem as drunk as he looked. The crowd erupted into whispers. A marshal? Here? He can't ignore that. Maybe the girl is innocent after all. Judge Blackwood's voice broke the noise, harsh but trembling. "You have no jurisdiction here. This is a local matter." Caleb tilted his head, his smile widening just slightly. Dangerous. "Local matter? You're about to kill a girl with nothing but your word as evidence. I've seen more justice at a card table in a saloon." He took a deliberate step closer to Marlo. His boots no longer stumbled. His posture straightened. And in that moment, the crowd realized maybe he wasn't drunk at all. The execution halted. The town held its breath. For the first time, Judge Blackwood looked uncertain. And Caleb Mackenzie wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Caleb's voice rang out over the square, sharp now, cutting through every whisper. "Tell me, Judge, did you find the necklace on her? Did anyone see it in her hands? Or was it just easier to call her guilty?" The judge's lips curled in a sneer. "The law doesn't require me to answer your questions. The girl was alone in my home when the necklace went missing. That is proof enough." Caleb barked a laugh that echoed off the storefront windows. "Proof? I've seen better evidence at a pie-eating contest. You call this justice? You mean to tell me a young woman is about to hang because you assume she stole something?" The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. People exchanged nervous glances. A schoolteacher whispered, "That doesn't sound right." Old Tom Fletcher scratched his head, muttering, "Always thought this smelled rotten." Judge Blackwood's face turned red. His hand tightened on his gun, but Caleb took another step closer, steady as stone now. His drunken act was gone. His voice carried authority, anger, and something else. Conviction. And then he reached into his saddlebag. The crowd stiffened, expecting a gun. Instead, Caleb lifted his hand high, sunlight flashing off something green. Gasps erupted. Women clutched their mouths. Men leaned forward in disbelief. Tea was the necklace, blazed like fire, each stone glinting bright against its gold chain. Funny place for a stolen necklace to end up, Caleb said, his voice calm, steady. I dug it up an hour ago. In your garden, Judge. The square exploded into noise. In his garden? He buried it himself. God Almighty! Judge Blackwood's face went pale, his authority slipping with every whisper. He sputtered, That's impossible! You planted it there! Caleb's bloodshot eyes locked onto him, unblinking. Planted? I rode into town 20 minutes ago. I've never seen this girl before in my life, but I've seen plenty of corrupt officials, and you smell like one from 3 counties away. He tossed something else onto the platform, a torn scrap of expensive silk. Its embroidered pattern was unmistakable. Elizabeth Blackwood's dress. A cry rose from the women in the crowd. They recognized it instantly. Mrs. Blackwood had worn that gown only weeks before, boasting of its fine stitching. Caleb held the fabric up beside the necklace. Wrapped around it, buried together. You want to explain how the thief's silk matches your wife's dress, Judge? The judge's jaw worked silently. His hand twitched toward his gun, then froze. The crowd was no longer on his side. The schoolteacher stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. I saw Marlo that night, Judge. She came to my house in tears, said she'd witnessed something strange but was too scared to speak. Samuel Mueller, the store owner, added his voice. She told me the same, Judge, that she saw something that could get her in trouble. The whispers became shouts. A wave of voices pressed against the judge's power. Even Sheriff Morrison shifted uneasily, his hand on his own weapon now, but his eyes no longer on Marlo. They were on Blackwood. The judge's authority, the iron grip he had ruled with for years, was slipping like sand through his fingers. And Caleb wasn't finished. His voice grew sharper, louder, carrying across the chaos. So tell us, Judge, is this still a local matter? Or are we all staring at the face of a liar? The crowd roared. Blackwood's pale face twisted with rage, but behind his anger was fear. For the first time in years, the town of Bitter Creek no longer believed their judge. Lips curled back in a snarl. His trembling hand dropped to his revolver, the polished steel flashing in the sun as he leveled it straight at Caleb's chest. The crowd froze. Not a breath, not a whisper. Even the children in the windows went silent. Step away from the prisoner, Blackwood barked, or I'll put you in the ground. Marlo's heart hammered in her throat. Caleb stood only feet from her, rope still biting into her neck. The judge's revolver pointed squarely at him. The marshal didn't flinch. He didn't even reach for his own gun. Instead, he spoke, calm, cold, every word slicing through the tension. You think you scare me, Judge? You think I rode all this way to die on your platform? No, I came here for you. The judge's eyes flickered. His grip tightened on the gun, but a bead of sweat trickled down his temple. Caleb's voice cut like a blade, his drunken slur gone, replaced by hard steel. 3 years I've been tracking you. 3 years since you vanished from Carson City with $50,000 of territorial funds. Gasps erupted in the crowd. Men shouted. Women cried out in disbelief. Blackwood's face turned from pale to ashen. Lies! All lies! He spat, but his hand shook visibly. Caleb took a slow step forward, his eyes locked on the judge's. Your name ain't Harrison Blackwood. It's Henry Blackstone, former treasurer of Nevada, embezzler, fugitive, murderer. Wavered. His authority was crumbling. Marlo's breath caught. Her knees weakened beneath her. Could it be true? Had the town been ruled all these years by a man living under a stolen name? The sheriff shifted, his voice low but firm. Judge, is it true? The crowd pressed closer. Dozens of faces glaring at the man who had ruled them like a tyrant. Caleb's voice thundered over the chaos. Tell them, Judge. Tell them how you fled west with government money and built yourself a new throne on lies. Tell them how you've been playing God with their lives while hiding from the law." Blackwood's lips moved soundlessly. The revolver in his hand trembled. He looked less like a judge and more like a cornered outlaw. Then, from the edge of the square, a voice cried out, sharp, desperate, unmistakably feminine. "Harrison, stop!" The crowd turned. Elizabeth Blackwood, the judge's wife, was running toward the platform, her fine blue dress trailing in the dust, hair tumbling loose from its pins. Tears streaked her face. "Don't do this!" she screamed. "They know, Harrison! They know about Rebecca!" The judge staggered back a step as if struck. His gun arm sagged. "Elizabeth!" But she was already climbing the platform, gasping for breath, voice breaking. "She knows, Harrison. The girl saw the letters, Rebecca's letters." Like a thunderclap. "Rebecca!" The crowd erupted in confusion. "Who's Rebecca? What letters?" Caleb's eyes narrowed. His voice dropped, dangerous. "Who's Rebecca, Judge?" Elizabeth sobbed openly, her hands shaking as she pointed at her husband. "Rebecca was his first wife, in Carson City. He told you all she was dead, but she's alive. Alive, and still writing him." A wave of shock tore through the crowd. Bigamy, betrayal, lies stacked upon lies. Marlo finally found her voice, her words trembling but clear. "I saw them. The letters. When I worked in your parlor, Mrs. Blackwood, I saw you reading them, signed, 'Your loving wife, Rebecca.' You caught me looking. That's why you framed me. That's why you wanted me dead." Elizabeth covered her face with her hands, sobbing harder. "He made me, Marlo. He made me help him." The crowd surged forward, fury rising like a storm. Years of fear were breaking, replaced with rage. The judge's pistol wavered, useless against the weight of truth, pressing down on him from all sides. Caleb's hand hovered over his gun now, steady, deliberate, his eyes locked on Blackwood. "It's over, Henry. Put the gun down, or I'll put you down myself." Silent except for the judge's ragged breathing. His revolver trembled in his hand, pointed weakly at Caleb. The once feared ruler of Bitter Creek now looked like nothing more than a cornered animal. Elizabeth Blackwood's voice cracked across the platform. "I won't let you hang an innocent girl to protect your lies, Harrison. I already helped you steal from the treasury. I already helped you build this sham of a life. But murder? Not anymore." Her words struck like a hammer. The judge's shoulders sagged under the weight of his wife's betrayal. His gun arm dipped lower. Sheriff Morrison stepped forward, hand resting on his own weapon. "Judge, or whatever your real name is, put the gun down." Blackwood's eyes darted between the crowd, pressing closer. The sheriff's steady stare, Caleb's unyielding gaze, and Elizabeth's tear-stained face. His hand shook violently. Then Marlo spoke, her voice soft but cutting. "How many more, Judge? How many lives did you ruin to protect your lies?" The words seemed to crush him. His revolver slipped from his grip and clattered onto the platform. He stood there, chest heaving, eyes hollow. Caleb moved fast. In one motion, he cut the ropes binding Marlo's wrists and yanked the noose from her neck. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, the rough burn of the rope still stinging her skin. Tears poured down her cheeks as relief flooded through her. In shouts, anger boiling over. Men surged forward, demanding justice. Women cried out, cursing the man who had ruled them with iron lies. Sheriff Morrison raised his hand, commanding silence. His voice thundered, "Harrison Blackwood, alias Henry Blackstone, you are under arrest for theft, fraud, perjury, and attempted murder." The judge didn't resist, as the sheriff wrenched his arms behind his back and clapped iron shackles onto his wrists. The fight had drained from him completely. Elizabeth stood trembling, her face pale. The sheriff turned to her. "And you, Mrs. Blackwood, you'll answer for your part in this." She nodded weakly, too broken to argue. "The people of Bitter Creek once cowed into silence, surged with a new voice now. Tom Fletcher, the old rancher, shouted, "Tear down that gallows!" Others echoed him, and within minutes men with axes were hacking at the wood, dismantling the platform that had nearly claimed an innocent life. The noose that had threatened Marlo was tossed into the bonfire, flames devouring it as cheers rose against Caleb, her legs too weak to stand on their own. She looked up at him through blurred tears. "Thank you. If you hadn't come—" Caleb shook his head, voice low and steady. "You should never have needed me. Justice should have protected you." For the first time, his hard eyes softened. As the sun dipped low, the sheriff marched the disgraced judge and his wife toward the jailhouse. The town followed, buzzing with anger, disbelief, but also hope. The shadow that had hung over Bitter Creek was lifting. Marlo stood in the square, staring at the place where she'd nearly died. Her voice trembled as she whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "How many others weren't as lucky as me?" Caleb heard her. His jaw tightened, guilt flickering in his eyes. "Too many," he admitted, "but we'll set it right. Every last one." The people gathered around them, no longer silent, no longer afraid. The law that had once been a weapon in the judge's hand was finally broken, and in its place, something new had been born, the chance for true justice for Bitter Creek. But the town did not sleep. The gallows that had stood for years as a symbol of fear now lay in a pile of broken wood, burning in a bonfire that lit the desert sky. Sparks rose like fireflies, carrying away the memory of injustice. Marlo sat on the porch of Muller's store, wrapped in a blanket, her wrists raw from the rope. Mrs. Muller brought her hot coffee, though her hands still shook too much to hold the cup steady. She stared out at the square, haunted by the memory of the noose around her neck. Caleb approached, hat in hand. His voice was low, heavy with guilt. "I should have caught him sooner. Should have stopped him before he hurt so many." Marlo shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can't save everyone, but you saved me. And maybe that's enough." Her words softened him, though the weight in his eyes remained. Inside the jailhouse, Judge Blackwood sat silent, staring at the wall. The man who had played God with lives for years was now just another prisoner, awaiting trial. His wife, Elizabeth, wept in the next cell, broken by her own choices. Sheriff Morrison stood guard, grim but resolute. He promised the people that every case the judge had touched would be reopened. Justice, real justice, would be done. Days later, federal officers arrived. They carried away boxes of forged documents, stolen deeds, and a leather journal that listed every bribe and false conviction the judge had ever ordered. At least 30 innocent names filled those pages. Some were already dead. Others, perhaps, could still be freed. The people of Bitter Creek mourned what they had lost, but for the first time in years, they looked toward the future with hope. 6 months later, Marlo Thorne no longer lived in Bitter Creek. She moved to Denver, where she opened her own seamstress shop. She became known not just for her skill with the needle, but for her kindness, always hiring girls who, like her, had nowhere else to go. She never married, but she lived a life of quiet dignity, remembered for her courage. Caleb Mackenzie stayed behind for 2 years. He worked alongside the new territorial judge, ensuring every wrong Blackwood had done was corrected. His reputation grew. Eventually, he was appointed territorial marshal, known across the West as the man who brought down a corrupt judge. Sheriff Morrison temporarily served as the town's judge until a new one arrived. To everyone's surprise, he proved fair and honest, the kind of justice Bitter Creek had never known under Blackwood's rule. And the gallows? It was gone. Its wood turned to ashes the very night Marlo was saved. The townspeople swore never again to build such a platform in their square. It wears a black hat. Sometimes it wears a robe of authority. But the truth is always there, waiting for someone brave enough to speak it. Justice is not delivered by fear, but by courage. The courage of one voice willing to stand against lies. If you were in Caleb Mackenzie's place, standing on that gallows with a corrupt judge's gun pointed at you, what would you have done? Would you risk your life to expose the truth, or walk away like the rest of the crowd? Tell me in the comments below, because your answer reveals which side of justice you would stand on in the Wild West. Subscribe for more powerful stories of courage, betrayal, and redemption from the untold history of the Old West.